Hey YouTube, the Wood Craftsman here. So I know I've been a little MIA on the YouTube videos. A lot of stuff going on. It's come to the end of the year and just trying to clean things up before the end of the year. But I wanted to kind of give you an introduction of a project coming up. Actually, it's a machinery equipment project, and that is this wide belt sander. So it needs a little bit of work. I'm going to give a little bit of background on it as far as the decision why, what made me, things like that. I have been in the market for a wide belt sander for a long time. It's been on my wish list for a very long time. We currently right now are renting two different wide belt sanders from two different places, and it's been working good, but at the same time it's a little bit of a nuisance, and it's becoming a little bit more of a nuisance just for the simple reason of timing. You know, the shop here runs all sorts of different hours depending on what we got going on, and there's been times in the past where we've needed to use a wide belt sander and couldn't get into it because maybe it was the weekend or it was later at night, things like that. Long story short, my sister-in-law had sent me a link to I think it was called a website called Auction Masters, and there was a local cabinet shop auction about an hour north of me that had a 37-inch single head sander on the auction. And I started looking at it. It was a safety speed just like this one here, except it was, I think, a 2017 model. 10 horsepower single phase, 37-inch capacity, runs a 37-inch wide by 60-inch long belt. Thought about, yeah, you know, I should really look at that. But when I realized it was single phase, I knew right away that that thing was going to go up in cost, because the single phase ones are a little bit more sought after by the small shop versus the large shop. They'll let the single phase go because they're after something more, you know, with multiple heads, 3-phase, things like that. So I kind of put it off a little bit, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and he's like, you know, he said, why don't you look at Facebook Marketplace? And that's what I did. And I came across Facebook Marketplace. There was another one that was just like that, except it was a 15 horsepower 3-phase. And they were asking $12,000. It's like, okay. It was 2017, 2018, I'm not sure, which is not too far from brand new. And I got to thinking about it. It's like, no, I either should need to go back to the one on the auction or I need to look for something different. Well, in my search, I found a 43-inch single head. This is a 4375. It runs a 43-inch wide belt, and it's 75 inches long. 20 horsepower 3-phase at a ridiculously reasonable cost. 3 hours north of me. I messaged the guy just to see if it was still available and the condition, things like that. Now in the meantime, I still was kind of thinking, hey, that 3760 that's an hour north of me, 10 horse single phase, ready to go, should I look at it? But the more I thought about it, that 37-inch would service probably 80% of our needs, but the remaining 20% I'd still have to go to one of the other shops to rent their sander, versus a 43-inch takes care of probably 99% of our needs. They service everything we need, but I think that's the widest you can get in a wide belt. To be independent, this one became very reasonable. So I went to go look at this one, talked to the guy, heard it run, and the guy was very upfront. He goes, hey, it needs a little work, needs a little TLC. Basically told me what's wrong with it, and the biggest thing that's wrong with it right now is the contact drum, which is the main drum on the front. It's a rubber coated drum. The rubber started to delaminate. Now, this is a brand called Safety Speed. It used to be called Safety Speed Cut. If you're familiar with Safety Speed Cut or Safety Speed, you've probably seen the sanders before, but you may have seen a sander that's just like it, but in kind of a medium blue, which is a company called Halsty. Halsty was the original manufacturer of these two models, the 3760 and the 4375. The whole thing was, it's like, okay, it needs some work, but the guy had it down to a price that I was foolish to walk away from it and kicking myself later. It's like, for a couple $1,000s, maybe a little more, I could have a machine that's probably servicing me for the rest of my life. I decided I was going to do it, put a down payment on it, it got delivered, and here it sits. So this is the 4375, so that means you can run about a 42.5 width capacity through here. I believe it's 7.25 inches deep if you want to, so like drawer boxes, if you want to level your drawer boxes, things like that. It is a 20 horsepower 3-phase, and that's kind of where the rest of this gets interesting. Safety Speed offers this particular sander in 4 different configurations, 5 including if you want high voltage 3-phase, which is 460. You can get in a 10 horse single phase, 20 horse 3-phase, 30 horse 3-phase, and then then the higher voltage in 3-phase. Otherwise it's 230. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of detail as far as how the wide belt works. It's just like a drum sander, but the advantage is you have a longer abrasive that runs on rollers, so you have more longevity versus just a drum wrapped in abrasive. And then the scratch pattern is slightly different when you lower what they call a platen, but that's for a different discussion. Anyways, perfectly fine. They've been building that for quite a while. Actually, Halsey is the one who started it, and kind of walked me through what needs to happen. To convert this over to a 10 horsepower single phase, number one is they had suggested, highly suggested, to keep things simple, is to follow what they do, which was use a 10 horsepower single phase farm duty motor. That's what I got right here. This big old US Electric 10 horsepower single phase farm duty. Now what's the difference between a farm duty and industrial duty is farm duty has a manual thermal overload. So when you overload it, there's a thermal overload within the side conduit box here, and it'll trip, and you have to reset it after it cools off in order to run it again. Versus if you want with industrial, I'd have to add an overload here. Now there is an overload here for the 3-phase, but because I'm using a 10 horsepower single phase, I don't need the overload underneath the contactors. So that was how they suggested, because that's how they build theirs. Second part was motor mounting. The motor mounting is going to be a little bit tricky for a simple reason is that these machines, basically when they build them based on the motor frame that's going in that. So a 20 horsepower versus a 30 horsepower, I think the frames are different, so therefore it's basically like ready rod or all thread. They weld that to the frame and then they level the motor with nuts and washers. So a 10 horsepower frame is quite a bit different than a 20 horse, but I've got the motor mount figured out. I'll cover that probably in a future video. The 10 horsepower single phase motor cost me about $1,000. I got a really good deal from a local motor repair shop. They had this one here that they had been stocking for a while for a local car wash that actually ran single phase. And the reason they used this one is because a lot of times on these car wash pump racks, the pump is right up against the motor and they can't have a big conduit box on the one side. That's why they were stocking that one, but that car wash I think closed, and he's like, we can give you a really good deal on this one. So I took that one. The contact roller, which essentially is the roller that takes the grunt of the stock removal, that is going to cost me around $1,200 after tax, or around $1,200, somewhere around there, and then just putting it in. And after that, it's pretty simple. So this project, I don't have a lot of money invested into it, but what I have invested into the sander, I was foolish not to put some investment into it, as far as spending maybe $3,000–4,000 to get this thing up and running in pretty much good working condition that'll service what we need to do in the shop here. Obviously, it doesn't look new, it's got paint wearing, things like that, but it's gonna be a fully functional machine when it's all said and done. The other thing with that is dust collection. Before I get into that, you might be asking, well, why wouldn't you just run a rotary phase converter? I thought about that. The thing with the rotary phase converter is, number one, they're kind of expensive. Yeah, you can build one, but you gotta have the time and effort to actually build it, to actually balance it, so you've got even voltage between all 3 legs the best you can. You have to have star capacitors, potential relays, things like that. It's a lot of effort, so you're almost better off of buying one. Second of all is, with a 20 horsepower 3-phase motor, I went to American Rotary and sized phase converter for this application, and turns out to be I need a 40 horsepower slave or 40 horsepower rotary phase converter, which is pretty normal. It's always been that way. For your harder starting load, they typically have to go to twice the size of the largest horsepower starting to run, in this case 20 horsepower. The problem is that a 40 horsepower rotary phase converter needs a 125 amp circuit to support the inrush current of starting this motor and the idler motor. I don't have a 120 amp circuit to support that. The shop runs off of a 100 amp supply or service. That's where it's kind of like I was really limited to single phase. Now, you might be saying, well, you should think about upgrading your service. You should, there's no question. I tried doing it about 5 years ago, and I was just going through this I don't know, I was basically phone tagged with the power company. I kind of gave up, and I wished I would have done it back then because I probably wouldn't be in this situation right now. And I know today the costs with aluminum and copper, that's definitely gone up significantly. So we're doing the single phase route. I have very high confidence after talking with other people and actually knowing what the capability of 10 horse is going to do. A 10 horse will support this just fine. Am I going to remove 20 thousandths in a pass? Probably not. Probably on 15 thousandths with 100 grit at the most. But again, this is all about basically saving the labor of not having to take our doors and face frames, throw them in the back of a truck, drive to one of the two shops, unload it, run it through their sander, load the truck back up again, drive back to the shop here, and unload it. There's some handling and drive time as well that's in that. Cost-wise, the return on investment on this is going to be fairly quick. I'd say probably about 24 months, a little bit less maybe, depending on the workload we have. Again, I'm not going to disclosure as far as how much I paid for the sander, but for what I paid for it, it's foolish for me not to throw a few dollars into it to have a sander that'll basically service what we need for as long as we need it. The dust collection side of things is a little tricky. Because we're running off a 100 amp service here, this sander needs two additional things. So it needs a 50 amp circuit for the sander, it needs dust collection, and it needs compressed air. The dust collector in the shop is a 7.5 horse. The air compressor we have is the 80-gallon 2-stage 5 horse. You start adding all that up, we're getting pretty close to as far as what the service is able to handle. The other thing is with the dust collection is it's in the other part of the shop right now. Right now we're in the warehouse, and it's going to be sitting in the warehouse for a time being until maybe we do something with this part of the warehouse, because this was something I really wasn't planning on, but I couldn't walk away from it. We're going to deal with it out here for the time being, and this is going to have its own dust collection system. For the simple reason, number one is to run a 5 horse compressor to support the tracking on this, a 7.5 horse dust collector, and a 10 horsepower motor. Like I said, that would be probably taxing the service pretty heavily. Second part of it is I'd have to make a penetration through the wall back into the shop to basically have a 6-inch pipe from here go into the shop, basically make a U-turn 180 degree to connect back in the dust collection system in the main trunk line, because the blower is pretty much right over here 10 feet. And if you know anything about dust collection, dust particles don't like sharp turns, so you have to go past it. In this case here, because the blower is on the wrong side, I'd have to go past it, make a 100-degree turn, and go back to the trunk line. Not really feasible. We're going to use a blower here that I had gotten about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, somewhere around there. For a project, I picked this up at an auction for like, I don't know, 50 bucks, whatever. It was 3-phase originally. I took the motor off of it. It was 3-phase. I think I traded in for a single phase or something for something else. And then kind of forgot I had this. And I tried it with a lower RPM motor for something else. It didn't work for that project, so I threw it up on the shelf. Forgot about I had it. Then all of a sudden, when I'm looking for dust collectors for this, combing Facebook Marketplace, I was looking at the 2-bag jobs, the Jets and the Deltas and the Grizzlies, where it's just got the blower and it's got like either a duct hose, a piece of flexible tubing going from the blower into a poor man's separator with a bag on top and bottom. Those were 250, all up to 600 bucks. Really was planning on that, but I thought to myself, hey, you got this thing here. Kind of forgot about it. I got a 2-horse motor for it. It's a brand new motor on it as well. This is 3-phase, going to run off a VFD. And the thought process is that I could slow it down a little bit because this blower does get noisy. I had kind of forgotten about that. The VFD I can soft start as well. That was kind of the thought behind this. And this dust collection system is going to be basically what I got right now. Single stage unit, built like a Murphy Rogers MRT system, which is essentially just a blower that sits on the floor, shoots up a spiral pipe, goes over to 180 degrees, and then blows into what they call a bloom bag or a filter bag that slips over a 55-gallon drum. Woodmaster from Woodmaster Machines has built one just like it as well, and actually I think Woodmaster uses the same blower, which I think is made by Cincinnati Fan, if I'm not mistaken. That's going to be this here. There's some work to be done yet. I need to order the roller. The roller has a couple options. I can buy a brand new roller, or I can get the existing roller recovered. There's 3 places down in the cities that could actually take this roller, basically delaminate or peel off or grind off the rubber and then recoat it for me in the durometer I need, which is around a 60 to 65A. The quote I got back from the one place was $200 away from a brand new roller. I'm going to a brand new roller, so I'll pull this roller out, I'll throw it up on the shelf as a spare. I'll probably get it recovered at some point in time, and then should something happen, I can drop this one in and get the other one repaired. So now you're wondering, it's like, well, what can happen to a roller? Because that roller is covered in rubber, about 3/8 of an inch thick, if you have a piece for some reason that's too thick, or maybe you got nails, not so much nails, but something very hard, you can actually cut a groove in the roller. And in the process, you're probably going to rip the belt. Sanding belts for these, I don't know, if you buy like a 3M one, for example, probably about $100 a piece. If you buy the aftermarkets, I would say anywhere from $50 to $75. If you always do hand sanding after, such as with an orbital, like we do in the shop here with like an air orbital or an air DA, we use Mirka paper here. This isn't as critical as far as what your finished grit looks like, but at the same time, you want to make sure that when you're done sanding with your final pass, that you don't have a lot of hand sanding to do. The only hand sanding you really want to be is just taking cross grain out of your doors and drawer fronts and your face frames. Cross grain is when your parts go through this sander, because the parts are going in this way and the belt is pushing against it, the sanding belt's pushing against it. When you're running with the grain, you'll have a lineal scratch pattern it won't really pick up on. When you go across the grain, you'll see actual like lines going across the grain. Any wood shop or cabinet shop that has a drum sander wide belt knows exactly what I'm talking about. If you're a DIY or hobbyist and don't have like a little drum sander, it may be harder to understand, but anytime you sand across the grain, you get linear scratches. Anyways, that's kind of one of the things I wanted to talk about in this. I wanted to keep this video kind of short. If you want to know, what the difference is between a drum sander and a wide belt, the biggest difference is the type of abrasive. You basically run an actual sanding belt that's got a seam in it, just like your little belt sander, except on a much bigger scale. It has a conveyor belt just like a drum sander. It's got hold downs in it just like a drum sander, but like I said, it runs an actual belt of sandpaper, and there's 3 rollers on this one. There's an idler roller on the top, just like on your little vertical belt and disc sander you could buy, and then there's a roller in the back, and then there's the contact roller in the front, and that contact roller is what actually takes the grunt of the material it's sanding off. And then real briefly, when you're into like your finishing grits, say like your 150, 180, 220, on your last pass or two, there's what they call a platent. And that platent is a pad that is the length of your sanding belt. So in this case here, it's around 43.5 inches. I think it's just a little bit longer. And that pad has like a piece of foam on it, and it's wrapped in graphite. And that hangs down just ever so slightly below the contact drum, and it changes the scratch pattern. And once I get this up and running, I'll be able to show you as far as what the scratch pattern looks like with and without the platent. And you'll find that in any commercial wide belt sander, whether it's a single head or multi-head, it will always have what they call a combination head, which this one has here, where you can lower the platent or raise the platent to use it to do different things, but that platent gives you a much different scratch pattern. Very similar to a little portable belt sander. You're not sanding with the drum of the belt sander, you're actually sanding with that flat spot, and that flat spot actually might have a pad of graphite underneath as well. And like I said, it's a little different scratch pattern, so I'll show you that once this thing's up and running. Anyways, this is exciting. It's been on my wish list for quite a while, and it was kind of one of the ones that need to find funding, but it wasn't a really high priority because we were already renting 2 different ones from 2 different shops, just kind of whoever could get us in when we needed it. This will take away that reliability on someone else to do the sanding for us. So, and it'll save some road time as well and some miles. That's kind of it for now. I don't know what else more to tell you on this one because it's not running, but the biggest thing is getting the roller replaced, getting the 10 horsepower motor installed, and then I have to get a circuit run for the sander as well. So other than that, this is exciting. So this is not something I was planning on. It's just something I just kind of walked into, I guess. So I'm I'm really excited. Anyways, I'll be sure to give you more updates once this thing gets up and running. All right, guys, hope you guys enjoy the video. Questions and comments are welcome. Thanks for watching.